Nothing yet, but they're working on it.
Okay, good. Well, hopefully we'll get it done tonight.
Yeah.
I think they got the, that's a good news. They got the parking.
Oh, okay, great.
Yeah.
So it's 6 o'clock. I'm still going to ask that we wait another 3 or 4 minutes to make sure that everyone joins in. And for those of you that heard, we'll make a formal announcement, but the water issue, the lower part of town should be back up and fully pressurized this evening. But again, I'll make that formal announcement once we start. We'll start in about 2 minutes.
Steve Allen, if you can make sure that you cover the Vista Points and the Crosswalk and whatever else that was covered before in the meetings before our council meeting.
Will do. Thank you for the reminder.
Okay, thanks.
All right, good evening, folks. Thank you very much for tuning in to our September 8th regular council meeting. I now call the council meeting to order. For those who logged in at 4:30, we did have a workshop that was a publicly noticed workshop on the Van Wyck Trail and connectivity projects. So we had a discussion about that. No decisions were made on anything. It was really just a workshop. It was a fact-finding chance for the engineer, planner, and grant analyst to weigh in on different options as people presented them. So we are now in the regular session. So we will start with the Pledge of Allegiance. Please say the Pledge of Allegiance at your space. All right, thank you very much. And now we will have a discussion or approval of our agenda. Actually, I'm sorry, I want to back up real quick just to make sure that everybody hears. There was a loss of water for 47 customers down in the lower part of town. Public Works has been working on that and expects to pressure up again this evening. There was a brief moment on the webpage when the comment was made that pressuring would return on Saturday. That is a mistake. So the plan is to get that up and running this evening. So I just want to make sure that everybody knows that.
Also, Steve, also notices were distributed to the affected residents, which stated Saturday. So this is a correction that that is supposed to be for tonight.
Okay, thanks for that, Eli. And certainly if you're in the affected area, you know someone who's not on the call, if you want to just help spread the word, that water will be returned this evening, thanks to the diligent work of Public Works. So thank you very much. So we will have an approval of the agenda. And so tonight's agenda, as stated, do we have any discussion from the council about agenda items for removal or consideration, including the consent agenda? Anything that we need to pull from consent and put in discussion?
Yes.
Go ahead, Richard.
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, I'd like to pull the water and usage report out.
Okay.
Thank you.
Other comments from the council on the agenda?
I believe we
Right, and-
received a member of the public wanted a thing removed or pulled for a later discussion. It was ASBS Stormwater project. They'd wish that this could also be a regular agenda item at the next meeting, from what I understood.
Yeah, I saw that they wanted it pulled and it was an update. And so we will certainly bring it back as a future agenda item as we move forward with that. Does that work based on what you read in the comment? Does that meet the needs or the request, in your opinion?
Yeah, I think that's what they asked for, that it would be on the next agenda as more of a
Okay.
discussion.
I agree. So we will make sure that that we include that as, usually at the end of the meeting, we discuss, agenda items for the future meeting. And so we'll make a note of that right now. Any other discussions from the council on tonight's agenda? All right. Any discussions from the community on the agenda? All right. Hearing none. Do we have a motion to approve tonight's agenda?
I'll move to approve.
I'll make
the
a
agenda.
motion.
Go ahead, David.
So we have a
Okay, I'll
first,
make a motion that we approve the agenda as updated.
all right, a first from Mr. Grover and a second from Mr. West.
I
All
second
those,
the motion.
oh, okay, a second from Mr. Columbus. All those in favor, raise your hand.
All right.
Yes, for what it's worth, folks, I know that there's quite a bit of delay for a lot of folks, so please don't hesitate to remind me to slow down if I'm not letting people chime in. So we have an approval for tonight's agenda. At this point, then, we've had our workshop. We have our minutes to discuss. We have approval of the minutes from the August 11th meeting. No, sorry, they will be reviewed at the next meeting. So we don't have minutes. My bad. I did not read that correctly. So we will look at our August meeting minutes at the October meeting. At this point, we'll move into council reports and committee assignments. Let's start with Mr. Columbus.
There we go. I don't have anything to report at this time.
Okay. Mr.
I was able to, oh, did you say Mr. Davies? What would you say?
Mr. Grover.
Okay, you did say that. I only heard that. I was able to attend the Redwood Coast Energy Authority meeting. I'm looking forward to Monday, starting my racial equity subcommittee with them too. And I'm also next Monday going to the offshore wind webinar. I'm starting, there's a webinar series. I'm registered for that. Be getting more involved with RCEA overall. So I'm looking forward to that. And I am up for election in November, just to make that announcement. I want to keep that fresh. I will be doing some phone banking probably. And I've asked Dwight Miller, former councilman, to be my campaign manager, and he agreed. So you might be hearing from him too, because he's definitely the in guy in Trinidad. He knows everybody. So that's about it for me. Thanks.
Thank you. Mr. Davies.
Yeah, the Trails Committee will be meeting again as a special meeting on September 21st, I believe it is. The Trails policy is coming back to us from the Planning Commission for another look. We met on the 15th, but I think I already reported that out at the last city council meeting. So I don't have anything else to report.
All right. Thank you, Mr. West.
I just have a couple of things. Again, the last chance grade is from HCOG, excuse me. Last chance grade. They are moving along what they think is very quickly. The geotech work is almost done. So the next part of the geotechnical phase is all done by helicopter into the remote areas. So not only is expensive. It's going to slow everything down. But they are getting closer. They say the environmental process will be done in 2026. So it's not like this is, but they're hoping that things will be able to pick up and maybe get it done a little bit faster. And the corridor work is the Indianola design now is only 2 months away. They're going to do a column supported embankment. So it's going to be, although it was planned for 6 years to get this done, they've managed to get it down to more like 4 years, and they expect some of the construction to begin working in the summer of 2021. So it actually is getting pretty close. That's all I have.
Thank you very much. I don't have any reports from my two committees. They were unable to meet this last month due to quorum issues, but I do want to take a brief moment. I expect and encourage comments and items from the floor that are not related to tonight's agenda to be directed towards the congestion and overnight parking on Edwards. This weekend was a very unpleasant weekend for that, and today Public Works was able to stripe the south side of Edwards with a big red stripe to prevent overnight parking. I also was able to speak with the sheriff, Joe Yeager, to discuss the issue, and he is now aware of the overnight parking. And so I just want to say that that situation definitely mushroomed out of control this weekend. And we will make sure that that is a key element of our traffic and parking study that this city needs to do at our earliest availability. So I just want to put that out there. I expect these comments, like I said, and the items from the floor is generally not a two-way discussion sort of thing. So I just wanted to be upfront with that. So I will move on now to staff reports. Mr. Nafla.
Okay, so I had prepared the staff report in the packet, but I did want to highlight the section regarding the League of California Cities Conference. That's normally held in Long Beach, but it will be virtual this year. The dates are October 7th, 8th, and 9th, which are going to be before our next council meeting. So they'll have quite a few interesting topics that relate to the council and also relate to staff. I plan on attending it, and if any of the council members are interested, let me know. I can make the arrangements so you could also participate in some of those sessions. On the website for the League of California Cities, you can see their agenda for the conference. So if you see some interesting breakout sessions and that you're interested in, let me know. So thank you.
Sorry about that, folks. Any questions for Eli based on his comments tonight or what was presented in the council packet? And just to clarify, because Richard asked to pull the water report, that'll be our first agenda item. So we will discuss that in the future. Any other? Okay, so moving on then to items from the floor. At this point, members of the public may comment on items not appearing on the agenda. Individual comments will be limited to 3 minutes or less. Comments should be directed to the council as a whole and not individual council members or staff. Council and staff responses will be minimal for non-agenda items. At this point, I will do my best to see raised hands, starting with Ms. Thompson. And don't forget to unmute yourself.
Thanks for the reminder. So I wanted to ask, is there a city ordinance that prohibits people from parking overnight on the city streets?
It's actually a county ordinance, and it is well documented. And so we also need to include signs, and this will be part of the larger discussion about just how to manage traffic in town. But we need signs that remind people and such. So that is definitely, it sort of has been growing all summer, apparently. Not apparently. It
Yeah.
absolutely has been growing all summer. And so it's on our list of very soon to deal with sort of agenda items.
Thank you so much.
Yep. Other items from the floor. Ms. Provolt. You're still muted, Sherry. There you go.
Thank you. Thank you, Council. I will have to jump off the call at 6:30. As you know, we have many fires in the Yurok Reservation lands, and we're going to have an emergency call regarding that. But I wanted to just take a moment and thank the Council for the 4:30 workshop. It's a beginning process. I think there's lots more discussion that needs to happen. And well-planned workshops in the future, I think, are needed. This was certainly a short notice for many people, but I was impressed by the number of people that did attend. But I would encourage more open workshops to talk about, the development of our trail systems and the growth of the Trinidad area. In that conversation, I wanted just to bring forth a comment or a perspective in that the city of Trinidad and the Yurok tribe will be meeting together, government to government, to talk about some of our cultural issues and areas of concern that we definitely want to make sure that council members are aware of and that we have are being heard around that. And I just wanted to make that note to City Council at the regular meeting today that we did talk about that in our workshop. For that, I'll thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Provolt. Other items from the floor. I don't see any other raised hands. Let me actually, if I could just back up very quickly and then we can return to items from the floor. I forgot to report out from our closed session from last council meeting. We had a closed session, which is the annual evaluation of the city manager. So I just want to report out that we had a very, very generative and iterative discussion with the council and the city manager on the operations of the city. And it was very inclusive and I think very productive. So like I said, I wanted to make sure that I reported out on a closed session from last council meeting. So back to items from the floor. Did that give anybody time to think of more things that they wanted to weigh in on? I see Jesse West has unmuted themselves. Nope. All right.
Can we try the callers just in case? I've heard from one person.
Yeah, this is the city clerk, Gabe Adams. I'm going to go ahead and unmute all of the callers.
Okay. At this point, anyone who's called in on the phone, you have the floor. Now there's 4 of you, so we'll try not to have all of you speak at once if you wish to contribute any items from the floor.
Hi, this is Sarah Lindgren. I was just wanting to clarify from the 4:30 workshop, was the government-to-government meeting with the Yurok tribe regarding just the Van Wyck Trail, or was it regarding the entire connectivity project?
Thank you for that, Sarah. Actually, it's an initial government-to-government meeting. The agenda is not fully set yet, but it's meant to introduce a variety of topics. The Van Wyck Trail connectivity is among them.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Anyone else who's called in?
Dorothy Cox here.
Go ahead, Dorothy.
I appreciate that you addressed the ugliness of the weekend that we had and the days and nights of ugliness. That was mostly what I was going to speak to. Besides the Edward Street issues, I spoke to a lady on Underwood who had people from the campers on her property using her hose, getting her water until she had to run them out and string something across her driveway. what time did we have law enforcement that day? I don't want to call enforcement because there's no enforcement, and I don't mean to be unkind about that, but there isn't. What police presence did we have? As I drove to the dock and back at 9 o'clock at night, there was a party going on at Launcher Beach, big halogen lights, music, dancing, general mayhem, so to say it simply. But what police presence did we have, and until what time that day? Saturday night? Was it Sunday night? Ugly night.
In general, oh, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to say that our police presence is, at least on those days, was generally in the daytime, but however, anything that happens 24 hours, it can be called in and they will respond from McKinleyville 7 days a week, 24 hours for anything. So just because the sheriff is not in Trinidad at the moment doesn't mean that we shouldn't go ahead and have it reported and have them come and address it, because that's certainly a violation of the COVID-19 restrictions of no more than 10 people.
Well, I think my point is that it's not so much that we could that someone would have to make a call or would have to report it. It's just that if we had a presence in town, just like on 4th of July, that maybe it would prevent it a little bit from getting as bad as it did. Could we maybe think about next year, Labor Day weekend, sort of like 4th of July, asking for extra help that weekend and maybe going above and beyond a little bit for the rest of us in town that have to deal with this? I'm doing daily evening walk every night. I walk from 6 to about 7:30 or 8. Mary and I walk every night, and the things that we saw and the things that we know are happening in this town should not be happening. And I think if we had more of a presence, like I said, not enforcement, just a presence, it would back up a little bit. I would hope. Thank you for your time. Over and out.
I just do want to comment the fact that from the city perspective, we made sure that we had coverage for Saturday, Sunday, and Monday. And then we had specifically asked for some patrols by the sheriff. But yes, we can ask for some patrols beyond the working hours. One sheriff individual works 10 hours, but to help cover the other time, we would have to ask for either patrols or having the public call the McKinleyville station, or if it's an emergency, call 911. Because we can't have someone here 24 hours, unfortunately. But certainly on the weekends such as that, we did request extra presence.
That's appreciated.
Other items from the floor at this time? All right, hearing none, we'll move on to the consent agenda. All matters of the consent agenda are considered routine by the City Council and are enacted in one motion. There's no separate discussion of any of these items. If discussions is requested by any council member, then that item is removed from the consent calendar and will be considered as our first agenda item. A single opportunity for public comment on the consent agenda is available to the public. Do we have any public comment on the consent agenda? Remembering that the water component has been pulled to the discussion action section. All right, hearing none, do we have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
I will make a motion that we approve the consent agenda as amended by Councilmember.
Second it.
We have a first and second. All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
All right, thank you very much. So we will move on to our first item is now the water study. And I believe that Richard had some questions that he not the water study, sorry, the water usage and report. And Richard, I ask that you lead this discussion.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So this is the first time I've had a chance to review the usage and loss report. Note that we're entering a drought season here. There's an average water loss of about 60,000 gallons a month. Now, I realize that every municipal water system has leakage. It's never 100%. But that's an annual projected revenue loss to the city of $73,000. And if you look at the 68-month projection that this report included, that's a loss of revenue to the city of $412,000. So I guess my question in looking at the data is whether or not there's any type of initiative of ongoing discovery and maintenance and correction of the major water losses that can be identified and found and then hopefully corrected within the city.
Yeah, Eli, do you want to take that?
Yeah, and I believe Steve Allen is on the phone and, or at least on the line. I was hoping that maybe Steve could weigh in and then whatever else I could finish off.
Sure, this is Steve here. Can you hear me okay?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
So good question. This is something that we have brought up before. So the city's water loss in their system is higher than what I would say is average. As you pointed out, you know, no city system is 100% leak proof, but
Right.
I think that there are certainly opportunities to reduce the amount of leakage in the city system. And so public works staff do regularly keep an eye on things and try to correct things when they see it. And we have also identified that in some of our previous reports as a recommendation or a priority item for the city's water system. And I know in discussions with city staff and others that we're also continuously looking for grant funding opportunities in order to help pay for some of the studies in order to try to get through and identify those, as opposed to trying to do that directly with the water fund itself.
But Steve, is there a plan put together to work toward resolving some of the leakage?
There is not a written plan that is something that we could share with you and others. There has been ongoing discussions and pursuing grant opportunities to try to get funding in place to help rectify that. And so as far as that goes, it's a plan. I don't know, Eli, if you want to add anything to that.
Yeah, we're actually working on putting together a capital improvement plan. And with that plan, we're hoping to, number one, get some grant funding. And number two, identify areas in the city that need attention between the distribution pipes and the meters. In talking with Public Works today, they indicated that approximately less than half, meaning possibly 30 or 40% of our meters have been replaced. And they said that if we could get the remaining meters replaced because they are aging, that by itself should help correct part of the problem. And then beyond that, then we will be needing to start working on identifying certain areas of the city to replace the distribution pipes. And through a capital improvement plan, we can do that over time. So number one would be if we can get grant funding, that would be ideal. Number two, we can identify from the water fund and then hopefully through the capital improvement plan, identify certain sections that can be done on a yearly basis. And until over time, we can get the situation and get the pipes improved, because a lot of these pipes are aging and need replacing. So we just need to do a methodical approach for that, which would be part of that capital improvement plan.
So if I can just follow up, is it the planning committee that would handle putting together a process to improve the water system? In other words, if we recognize there's a problem and every city has this issue, which committee does it fall to create a plan to help improve this whole loss of water through the system?
Yeah, the plan would be, number one, trying to identify some grant funds through our grants administrator. And then number two, working with our staff in Public Works to do a capital improvement plan on a staff level. And then we would present that to the city council. And then that would identify certain projects that we could be doing over the next 5 years and would identify what the potential cost would be and suggest how much money should be pulled from the water fund in order to address these different issues beyond any grant funding.
So, Eli, would that mean that the city manager, you would lead the process or push the process along?
Yes, I would be pushing the process along with Public Works and with our grants administrator. And then once we have certain things that are of substance, we can bring them to the council for approval. And eventually the whole capital improvement plan, but certainly identifying some of these water-related issues that would be able to be tackled by either grants or the water fund itself.
All right, thank you. If I can be of any assistance, please let me know. It's a concern that we have limited resources. I'd like to make sure we can use them as efficiently as possible.
Great, thank you.
Yeah. Okay.
All right, thank you for that discussion. And just so you know too, Richard, as you review the water studies that the city contracted about 1.5 years ago, this was an issue that was identified and some suggestions on how to work with it. So we do not have to start from ground zero. We have already some work. And it looks like we have public comment. So I'd like to open it up to public comment because I forgot to do that. Ms. Hostler, Carmison.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I would just like to remind the council that previously the Trinidad Rancheria Tribal Council has offered partnership on infrastructure. And we have been extremely successful in the past in collaborating with the grants manager and the previous city managers in administering these Indian Health Service grants. And the planning does need to take place, as Steve Allen mentioned, and as Eli mentioned, the city manager. But if there are, if the desire is there with the city council to work with the Rancheria as previously requested to deliver additional water, the Rancheria is absolutely and very capable of applying for grants. And there is a lot of money in the Indian Health Service funding right now. So I just wanted to remind everybody of those offers previously. And I appreciate Councilman Richard bringing up the issue because that's a lot of water that could be used and diverted to the Rancheria. So thank you.
Thank you for that, Ms. Hostler Carmison. Other questions or comments from the community? All right, hearing none, we will thank you for that. We will move on to our second agenda item. Let's see, continued discussion decision regarding the Van Wyck Trail Connectivity Project, revised design concept. So I'm going to turn this one over to Steve Allen for a preamble. Steve, are you out there?
I just got off mute. Eli, were you going to kick this off, or did you want me to jump in?
Yeah, I'll just let you get started, and then after that, we can see if Trevor or Becky or myself have something to add.
Okay, and my apologies, Mr. Mayor, but this was for the ASBS stormwater update. Was that correct?
No, this is the connectivity project, as Eli mentioned, with the
Perfect.
work on Edwards, the whole thing.
Okay, my apologies. I was distracted there momentarily and missed that. So there is a figure 1 in the agenda packet, which is helpful to reference. This update for the connectivity project is based on past input from stakeholders in the public, and the main issue and change is the desire not to repair the trail with a retaining wall specifically. So while the discussion has been going on for some time, the Caltrans connectivity grant project scope still includes that retaining wall. And so that's part of the request and clarification of the change in project is to get council approval to officially go back to Caltrans to request a change in scope so that we can deliver the project. So with the removal of the retaining wall in the Van Wyck Trail, the connectivity project was to provide pedestrian and bicycle connectivity down to the pier. And so that pedestrian and bicycle traffic is being routed down Edward Street, predominantly between Upper Van Wyck and Galindo Street, which now includes a sidewalk on the south side, and it also includes a curb and gutter and 5 to 6 foot wide bike lane, which is shown again on that figure 1 in the council packet as a cross section. So that cross section is what's basically looking across Edward Street, and it's looking uphill across Edward Street. So there's still parking on the uphill side. There's a reduced width travel lane down to 11 feet travel lane. And then there's a 5 to 6 foot bike lane, designated bike lane for uphill bike traffic with the curb and gutter. And then beyond the curb and gutter is a new 5 foot sidewalk. So obviously the pedestrian traffic is intended to be on the sidewalk. The uphill bicycle traffic is on that designated bike lane, and the downhill bicycle traffic would be in the shared vehicle lane, with the concept being that since they're traveling at a similar rate of speed, that it's okay for them to share that roadway per Caltrans guidelines. There's some other aspects that moving that traffic around also includes. One of them is the high visibility crosswalk, which is shown basically from Hector going across to Van Wyck. And that exact location could vary slightly, but this is the preferred location for the crosswalk. That crosswalk was also included in the original grant because there is an existing sidewalk on the north side of Edwards that goes up Edwards to Trinity Street. So that pedestrian traffic normally follows that sidewalk around, and then we need to get them to the other side of the street to continue the pedestrian connectivity. There are some other aspects further up Edward that are still included. So that's shown as the new fencing. It's not new because of the change in the project. It's just new because there's not fencing there existing. And part of that was to try to clarify where people should or shouldn't be to try to protect the coastal bluffs and people from getting out of their vehicles and kind of walking out and around on the bluffs. So that new fencing, as it was in the original grant, was a split rail wood fencing to try to keep with the rural character and not really block the view of houses and other businesses over the bluff, but to try to convey when people do park there that there is a fence and they're intended to stay within the fence line in the road and not go further out on the bluff. There is also a split rail fence that goes from the existing parallel parking spaces near where the lighthouse was, that goes down to Van Wyck Street. And again, that's a similar intent, is to help clarify where pedestrians are welcome and where we're trying to keep them from going off and tromping on the bluff. There is also a new aspect that's shown near the Hector in Edwards area, which is a Vista Point. And there are 3 of them proposed, one of them being in this location and the 2 others being on either side of the Van Wyck Trail, which is not being repaired as part of this grant. And the Vista Points are intended partially to help give visitors some of the same experience with the trail not being repaired, but it's also providing them a place to sit down, perhaps take some pictures, to rest, to have a picnic if they desire. There could be interpretive signage if desired. The details of the Vista Points are not well developed, which also means that there's a lot of room for input from the public and other stakeholders about what they can include. The intent of showing them is, again, in order for us to request a change in the scope from the Caltrans grant, to convey that this is a desire for inclusion that would be worked out in the design process. So the Vista Point, again, one of them is by Hector and Edwards near the Crosswalk. There is a second one on the uphill side of the currently closed section of the Van Wyck Trail, which does not admittedly have a super great view of all the ocean and the beaches. Does have a pretty good view of Trinidad Head, and it also happens to be an area right around the community garden, and it also happens to be kind of the terminus of the currently open trail. The one on the downhill side of the trail is basically where there is a current bench. So it's essentially it's a kind of a current Vista Point, a current bench that's there. So whether that bench gets added to with a table with interpreted signage, again, that's feedback that we would welcome. It's just the concept of trying to request a scope change from Caltrans to include these 3 Vista Points. I will point out, looking at this figure in the packet, something that was brought up at the workshop for council consideration, just so it doesn't get lost. And that was, currently there is a note that says remove failed retaining wall. The intent of showing that on there was to potentially remove part of the wall that has failed or is partially failed, that could be considered a liability from the city's insurance perspective who requested the trail be closed. That is not something that absolutely has to be done. It is something that we could request be included in the change in scope of the grant. In case next summer that seemed like a good idea, it could be included. But that is up to council and others whether or not that needs to be included. So to me, that's an optional thing that we could include or could remove. The other signage is consistent with what we had before. So traffic that is coming down, pedestrian traffic that's coming down Edwards, would be routed down Galindo and Van Wyck, and then down the boardwalk down to the harbor area. Downhill bicycle traffic would continue down Edward Street and down to the lower parking area. Bicycle traffic coming back uphill would come up Edwards and then cut across Van Wyck, up Galindo, and then go up Edwards along the area where there's a designated bike path. I believe those were all the items that I had in my notes. Eli, is there anything that I missed or anything that you want to add to that?
You did a really good job, and I appreciate that, Steve. I just want to point out that this grant from Caltrans is for $714,000, and the improvements that Steve had indicated, we wanted to make improvements and utilize those funds rather than losing that investment into the city. As was noted at the workshop, the current Van Wyck Trail is in disrepair, and unfortunately it was tying up this project that we had the potential of losing the grant funds from Caltrans. So as a result, we separated that, and that's why we had the workshop in the beginning, to make it clear that in addition to the Van Wyck connectivity project that was just discussed and is on the agenda, that we haven't forgotten about those other improvements, that we need to address the stormwater, the water, the utilities, and the trail, if there is a way to address the trail so that we would have the existing Van Wyck Trail in addition to the pedestrian improvements and the bicycle improvements on Edwards. But either way, we wanted to make sure that these great improvements along Edwards and with the Vista Points and so on are enhancing the city, and we didn't want to lose that opportunity. So we were very close where they said that we needed to move on the project or else we would lose the funding. And we had already initially asked for one extension, and then now with COVID, we asked for a second extension. And now the plans are going to be drawn after this meeting, where they're going to try to shape them based upon input that we received from the various individuals in the community. Now, the improvements along Edwards, as Steve was noting, on the south side, between the sidewalk and the bicycle path there, will be using existing right-of-way. So the street would remain the size that it is, and this would be existing right-of-way from this existing sidewalk into some of those neighboring properties, so that it would maintain the safety and it won't end up getting people closer into Edwards, but rather providing a safe venue for people to walk along Edwards in a new area that would take them down along Edwards, the south end of it, to Galindo, and there they would turn on Galindo and then turn back onto Van Wyck and continue on down to the harbor in a safe manner, because otherwise along Edwards, once you go beyond Galindo, it's very, very tight there and going around the bend. So this way it would be a nice improvement continuing on down there. And as it goes down Galindo to Van Wyck, that provides an opportunity for people to go to the Vista Point and enjoy the beautiful view that exists over there, and then continue on down to the harbor. So I will see if Trevor has something to add or Becky has something to add. Okay, go ahead, Becky.
So I just wanted to mention that there's a figure that was in the wrong place in the agenda packet that had the utility support that actually pertained to the proposed project here for the Van Wyck connectivity project. So I just thought to reduce confusion, I thought I would just mention that if you were interested in seeing that figure again, you can look it up. It's in the end of the consent section.
And Eli, if I may, thank you for reminding me about that. Becky, I was going to discuss that utility crossing briefly. This is the same utility crossing concept that Patrick Sullivan shared at the last council meeting. It's basically, for those who may not find it, just to describe it very, very briefly, it's essentially a steel I-beam that would be sitting on two concrete footings on either side of the very active slide. So that's somewhere between 50 feet or to 100 feet to try to span that. The goal of this is to try to utilize the grant funding to still stabilize the utilities as much as possible within the grant, because there was utility stabilization in the original grant. This project, if it's approved and Caltrans approves the scope change and we move ahead, it would not be built before next summer. So that's why there is a short-term, more immediate water line fix and storm drain fix to get through the winter. And this would be a proposal to Caltrans that we hope they would buy into, to do something more than a temporary water line sitting on the surface. This would allow these lines to span the active slide. And while they would be temporary, that could be a year, that could be multiple years until a more permanent fix is made, which would be removing the water line and the telephone and some of the other utilities from this area, and then studying different options for a more permanent solution to the gravity storm drain. So this interim design is intended to be the fit within the Caltrans grant, utilize that funding that's available to help get the city further down and to find a more permanent solution for those utilities in that location.
I would like to interject, at least this is a thought that I have. And because we have this on the agenda for tonight, I think it's very important that, you know, all of the aspects that you had presented before, Steve, that those would be considered for the planning portion of it. And then the council would be giving you direction to move forward on those. And then as far as the utility stabilization, the fact that you can present that, and then possibly we talked about having some options along Edwards. And I do definitely want the Native American community from the Churai to the Yurok to the Trinidad Rancheria to be able to weigh in on any improvements that are done in the trail area, the existing trail area, to make sure that the stabilization and so on are not impacting cultural resources. So we certainly would like to make sure that whatever tentatively may be considered there for the utilities is compatible and acceptable by the various sectors of our greater community.
Steve,
Thank you for that. And also just to remind folks that what we're talking about here is not the specifics, that there'll be other opportunities to discuss design of these features. In essence, what we're looking for here is discussion regarding moving forward with requesting a change in the project so that we can enter the design phase. So I just want to make sure that was clear. So any other questions at this point from the council to either Eli or Steve or Trevor or Becky? Richard.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. So I'm just looking at the plan, and it indicates that a new sidewalk will be installed along Edwards. So I understand the city has the right of way. What essentially happens to that property? Is it just the city takes over 5 feet of driveway space all the way up, or how does that actually work to install a sidewalk?
Yeah, this is Steve Allen. It's a good question. Yeah. So there, in that area, there is not I would say not an abundance of landscaping or things that would be like in some other areas of town if the city was going to utilize its full right of way. So there would be some impact to some of the yards outside of the driveway, and then the driveway itself. So we're looking for options that kind of seemingly, with all due respect to everyone, from my perspective, and yes, I'm an engineer, so keep that in mind, but there didn't appear to be a lot of landscaping in there that would be affected. So we were hoping that was the case. The driveways are a little bit more challenging. Sidewalks inherently are, fairly flat side to side to meet ADA standards, even though the street is fairly steep. So you are projecting out, and some of those driveways are a little bit steep and dive down. So there would be some work that would happen outside of the sidewalk area that would basically be a new driveway apron, and then there'd be an area of what we call a conform that you would conform from the new driveway area down to the existing driveway area. So there is the 5-foot strip that's essentially shown as the sidewalk. What's not shown that does need to happen is that the grant would be helping to pay for a nice conform so that people could actually drive their vehicle and get down into their driveway and get back out onto the road. So the project would pay for that. It's just not explicitly shown that is outside of the right of way, the city's right of way, but that would be incorporated as part of the project, if that answers your question.
Mm-hmm. Yes, thank you.
Mr. Davies?
Yeah, thank you. So one question is, what is the width currently of the lane of traffic?
a good question. As I recall, it's 12 to 13 feet, and I think it's on average about 12 and a half feet, which is fairly common. So 11 feet is a slightly reduced width that is still readily acceptable within Caltrans or the traffic engineering community. So it's not like it's going to, prevent commercial vehicles or trucks with trailers. It is what's commonly referred to as like traffic calming. We're trying to keep speeds down. So it still fits all your vehicles, including commercial vehicles, can traverse that. It's not the full standard width of 12 feet. And it's not as narrow as some other areas either. So it's about 12 and a half feet is what's existing, and those would be narrowed down slightly to 11 feet as part of this plan.
Okay, thank you. I had another question. I was looking through the packet in anticipation for the notes from the last stakeholder meeting that was held regarding this project, and I didn't see those included. So we still do not have the conversations that happened at one of maybe the last two stakeholder meetings, as far as I can remember. So I'm hoping those can be put out to the public and to the council. I was hoping they would be for this meeting as well.
I will just briefly respond. I did get the meeting notes summarized, and so they're available, but I passed them on, but I don't know I'm not the one who knows the process of how to get them out. So I will follow up with that, and I think probably they would just be posted on the city website. Maybe I don't know where, but I will follow up with that.
Thank you. Yeah, we've discussed having those as available as part of this discussion, because it seemed like meetings were happening outside of the public purview, and then none of the input is able for the rest of the public to review, which doesn't seem completely transparent in my opinion. And I have a few other comments about this project, but I will wait until questions are asked and the public has their chance to weigh in. So thank you.
All right, other points of clarification needed by the council from our city staff? All right, let's open this up to the public. Any questions or comments regarding the presentation information presented thus far?
Steve, this is Dick Bruce.
Go ahead, Dick.
I submitted written public comments, but I'd like to read them into the record.
Please do.
As a 40-plus year member of the Trinidad community, I would like to see the connectivity project move forward as long as it does not have a negative impact on the repair and reopening of the Van Wyck Trail. In looking at the map of the project, Figure 1, page 52 of tonight's packet, it appears that part of the project includes remove failed retaining wall in the closed area of the Van Wyck Trail. This would seem to indicate substantial ground disturbance, something that I thought we were trying to avoid. In addition, as stated by Supervisor Madrone at the August 19th Planning Commission meeting, there is reason to believe that this section of the trail can be repaired without removing the damaged section by using the existing wooden structure as support for an inexpensive temporary repair using stairs and clean native fill. Removal of the existing wooden retaining wall seems to me to be the first step in the ultimate permanent closure of the trail, and I oppose that. I'm also concerned about the placement of proposed Vista Points 1 and 2 out of 3 at the top and bottom of the closed section of the trail. Installation of these Vista Points with any kind of fence surrounding them will also be a step toward permanent closure of the trail. Regarding the proposed utility stabilization concept, using concrete foundations to support a steel I-beam carrying the utilities, I would suggest that the city consider using precast concrete abutments that could potentially support the future addition of a second I-beam, which could be used in conjunction with the first I-beam to support a pedestrian walkway, thus providing a ready-made option toward the reopening of the closed section of the Van Wyck Trail. My wife and I enjoy the scenic beauty of the Van Wyck Trail and the safety it affords pedestrians when accessing the harbor and beach area by avoiding the busy Edwards corridor. Should you decide to move forward with the connectivity project, please continue to pursue a means to allow use of the trail by pedestrians. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bruce. Just to reiterate that Steve Allen did mention that it's in the change request only as a placeholder should it be deemed necessary in the future. So thank you for that comment and for making sure that Steve heard you about the disturbance. Other questions, comments from the community? Meg, Ms. Stofsky. And don't forget to unmute yourself. You are still muted. There we go.
There we go. Okay. So, sort of piggybacking on some of the other comments that are indicating that substantial documentation that is missing, that is necessary for this to go into approving a project concept. How can you approve a project concept when previous meetings that I myself have attended, I haven't attended all of them, but I've attended enough to know that it is very, very clear that the Terai Ancestral Society is completely against some of these things, that including the Galinda Trail, that are going to be impacted in some way. I'm not versed enough in maps, but I am versed enough to know that you're supposed to include all of the documentation from other public comments, and if you've got stakeholders who are supposed to have been at meetings, then have contributed substantial comments, it's missing. So how can you possibly feel empowered and authorized to go forward with something when the people who are here now are saying there's missing documentation? I just don't understand it. And it also seems like there's some hints that Brown Act has been violated by having people making comments or writing things that haven't been included. So I just am going to urge you to stop now. Do not make decisions without the proper documents that are in the spirit of the law and also in the law itself on how to go forward on doing complex things. Artificially separating out something and saying, well, we're not going to go forward with that, but we're going to go forward with all other pieces of this that are, it's ragtag. It hasn't been properly established as far as, maybe it's just my 70-year-old brain who can't figure this out. But still, I think that some explanations are in order, and until that is clear and transparent, just stop. Thank you.
To respond, thank you for the comment, and we are collecting public input tonight. I see quite a few names on the screen, and I expect that more input will be provided this evening. So I'm going to continue with the discussion to allow the folks who have called in to continue weighing in on this project. At this point, do we have other folks who wish to weigh in? All right, seeing none at this point. Oh, Mr. Madrone.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and council members and community members. Quite a weekend, huh? Red Suns and all. So I think it was a good move to move the 6-inch water line into the sidewalk project up on Edwards. That takes care of one of those issues long term. Short term, suspending it across the slide is tricky. The existing line's buried. The area that the water line is buried in is not moving. It hasn't moved significantly for many years. It's in the headscarp area, and that headscarp has not moved upslope over the last 30 some years that I've been monitoring it. There is I think a temporary line, a 2-inch line that runs across there right now. That's exposed. But how do you anchor that line, so that it doesn't move? You got to drive something into the ground. If the ground moves, then your pipe moves. Maybe the engineer has a solution for that, but I think that's a little tricky. As far as drainage, I think that the individual who spoke earlier about concerns, I think it was in the workshop, they purchased Julie Fulkerson's old place, and they had concerns about what options the city might be considering with that drain coming down along the edge of Van Wyck, past that house, and then across the slide. So just to be clear on what that storm drain handles, it does, as Steve Allen mentioned, have an asphalt berm at the top of Van Wyck, right where Van Wyck leaves Edwards. There is a small asphalt berm, about 8 or 9 inches wide, and it's only a couple inches tall. And with the recent chip sealing, it's now even less tall. In other words, the chip sealing brought the road up another inch or so, and so the differential is very small. And you need to increase the height of that berm because if you get a really heavy downpour, the water running down Edwards could overwhelm that berm. All it would take is for the water to be a couple inches deep in the gutter. And when you get a 1-inch downpour or 2 inches in an hour, you can achieve that. So I would recommend you pay attention to that berm and add asphalt to the top of it to make it a little more defined so that water can't come off Edwards down Van Wyck. That water is not designed to come down Van Wyck. That Van Wyck storm drain only carries water off of that initial paved part of Van Wyck as it heads downhill, and the bottom gravel part down to the point where it goes into a culvert before that culvert goes underneath the driveway into the community garden parcel back in there. The only way water can get into that storm drain is in that upper section of Van Wyck. And there's only one parcel that drains to that storm drain. There's the road itself, as I explained, and the parcel upslope from there, Katie Boyle's old house with the small dwarf fruit trees, and it's all landscaped. So that parcel does, in fact, their driveway and the slope drains to this ditch that goes into the culvert system. But the next 4 houses or so above the Van Wyck Trail that has failed, those houses, they don't drain into that culvert. They drain across the slope. There is no way for the water to get into the culvert. The only way you can get into that culvert, if you're water, is off of Van Wyck at the head of the culvert. If you walk down that road, you'll see what I'm talking about. So just to be clear about what the drainage area is and what the contribution of runoff is to that storm drain, I said it at your last meeting, I believe that storm drain probably carries almost no pollution or very minor amounts of sediment, probably not significant other components like Edwards. It gets oil drippings, copper material from brake linings, and all kinds of things coming down that has to be treated into infiltration basins before it goes into the bay. This storm drain at Van Wyck is not like that. It is a small drainage area with very minor contributions of pollutants of any kind. So that's why I had suggested one fix would be to make a 90-degree elbow just past the Fulkerson parcel and run a storm drain down the slope and inject it into an infiltration dry well before it reaches the beach, so you're not dumping it right into the ocean. I looked at all these things a couple of weeks ago, and it's all doable. I also want to reiterate that repairing the Van Wyck Trail is very doable with minor work. So minor that we did the very kinds of work that I've suggested about 10 years ago without a coastal development permit. But things have tightened up there. And I agree with Trevor that I had a good long talk for an hour and a half with Bob Merrill at the Coastal Commission. And yes, the minor repairs that would be necessary to keep the Van Wyck Trail open temporarily would require a coastal development permit. In an ideal world, you do that permit along with the Galindo Trail and tie the closing of the Galindo Trail with the repairing and upgrades, minor repairs to Van Wyck, so you're keeping coastal access open while eliminating one that may in fact be impacting very sacred sites. All of this really does depend on the Churai Ancestral Society feeling good about these projects because of the areas they're located in. And so I have not gotten their approvals for anything. I'm not suggesting otherwise. But I do know that the Van Wyck Trail could be easily repaired for probably $10,000 or less, with a few steps on the one end where it drops down, a few steps on the other end where it drops down, a small amount of gravel added in, maybe 5 to 10 cubic yards maximum, with some minor carpentry and repair of the retaining wall to make it safe for visitors passing by that. So it is very doable. It could be in a permit application, and we could be looking at repairing that trail using public works and city funds. And I guarantee you there would be volunteers who would come down, including myself, to help you get it done. So I do believe in the short term, we could reopen that trail. And after that $10,000 repair, it would be just as safe as it's been for the last 30 or 40 years. So I encourage you to look at trying to do that. I know you're not here tonight to make that decision, but I just wanted to add to my previous remarks. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Supervisor Madrone. Just to remind folks, we are not talking about the Van Wyck Trail, and I'm going to ask that we stop talking about the Van Wyck Trail so that we can talk about the connectivity trail or the connectivity project, the pedestrian connectivity project. What I'm hoping for tonight is that we are able to make a decision, either all or part of the pedestrian connectivity that's presented in the council packet is going to be voted on this evening about what to do with it. And it does not have to go forward exactly as presented, but that is what we are discussing. So at this point, I want to bring it back to the pedestrian connectivity project and make sure that everyone has a chance to weigh in. Are there other folks from the community? I know that Councilman Davies has some more questions after public comment, so I want to make room for that. Do we have any more at this time comments from the public regarding what's in the packet and the connectivity project?
Hi, this is Sarah Lindgren O'Connor from the Churai Ancestral Society. I would just ask that council doesn't make a decision on specific design until after they have the government-to-government meeting with the Yurok tribe, because I think making the decision now and then meeting with them later would be a little bit like a kind of preemptive. So I would just recommend that the city wait on voting for at least design until after that meeting.
And Sarah, thank you for that. And just as a reminder that we actually are not talking about design, and we will have ample opportunities moving forward. What we're asking for is the ability to enter the design phase, but we have to ask for a different design than was originally approved in the grant application. So that is really exactly what we are headed towards, is having more input on design. So other questions or comments from the community? All right, and there will be, we'll make a little bit of room here after council comments and questions for the public to weigh in again. As these things go, as our conversations spark other ideas and whatnot, I want to make sure that we provide ample room. But I want to bring it back to the council at this point. Mr. Davies, you had indicated that you had maybe a couple more questions or comments. I'm not sure which, so I give you the floor.
Thank you. All right. So I had some comments to make, and one of them was, and it's been brought up previously, and it was brought up at our last meeting as well, as And I agree with Dick Bruce on this aspect, is I'm not in favor of anything that's going to be done that could preempt or fixing the Van Wyck Trail. So removing that retaining wall would seem to be very invasive to the soil, which we've all been trying to not do, which is the reason why we voted against having a soldier pile wall down there, from my recollection. So I would be all for not removing that retaining wall and leaving that there. I would like everyone to consider the cumulative impacts of all of these projects on our town, and I brought this up before. Stormwater project, this project, they're all talked about as separate projects, but in reality, they're not separate projects, because as we start looking at these timelines, they all start backing up on each other very tightly. There's a ton of construction that's going to be done with all of this. I do support the ability of this grant to pay for utility movement and working on our utility infrastructure, making it better and safer and more reliable. But with that said, I was not in favor of this project before I was on the city council, and I'm still not in favor of this project. It seems like we are scrambling to use money for using money's sake by putting in the sidewalk is a great idea, but you know, if the road is very wide right there to walk on, if people want to walk on, but if the trail is, you know, ultimately repaired, that is not an issue. And you know, the Trails Committee has lobbied for $10,000 in the budget to do trail maintenance. We have it this year. It was not used last year, so maybe the Trails Committee needs to lobby for carryover of those funds when they are not used. So back in the spring when we voted on not doing this project based on soldier pile wall and all of the public comment that was made in the years prior, and none of that comment has been produced for any of these conversations. So the comments that have been compiled over the years, in my opinion, should all be presented still, because it's like they never existed in the first place. And the overwhelming opinion of the public for this project was in the negative. You know, all of these paintings on the street with huge people riding bicycles in these sharrows, these shared areas. I mean, you go down to Arcata, they have them. It's a very urban environment. Maybe it's appropriate, but all of these markings, added fencing, the Vista Point things I don't agree with. Like Dick Bruce said, it's a way of just moving towards closing. That trail's been closed already for a year, and it seems like all of these plans are just cementing that to happening. So I'm one vote, and I realize that. I think you understand the direction I'm moving. If people are in favor of continuing with this project for using the money because we have the money, then the retaining wall needs to not be removed at a minimum. So those are my comments, and I'm interested to hear other people's comments on this and maybe addressing some of mine if you have an opinion contrary or in agreement. Thank you.
Thank you, Tom. Other council members? Go ahead, Jack.
I disagree with some of the things Tom has said, and I appreciate it, but I still can disagree. I've been working on this as part of the council for a long time, and I really think this has got some really favorable things going for it, especially after what I saw last weekend in terms of being able to take care of the road and create better walking spaces for people. I don't disagree that we need to keep the Van Wyck Trail. I think that's a great idea, and I agree that whatever is done, if they're going to remove some of the retaining wall, that would only be if it had to be for some reason. I think I really like Steve Madrone's idea of being able to put a trail in there. I like that. I think there's a lot of good possibilities. We do have to work with the Yurok tribe and the Churai to see how far we can get on those items. But I still think this is a great plan to get Edwards to be a safer road for everybody to use. And I think if they can put a sidewalk in, that's a nice place to have a sidewalk for people to walk down. People do walk up and down Edwards as well as the Van Wyck, and I think the opportunity to really upgrade this is nice. The other part of it is that this is something that I've heard from that I've heard from the Churai, and I'm not sure if Sarah can help me out with this, but at one point, that boardwalk that was put in was to try to get people to walk down the boardwalk and go around, especially the Galindo Trail. So this I felt would provide a nice walking area that would also use the boardwalk efficiently. So I think there's a lot to offer to upgrade this street to make it safer, easier for people to get up and down and to use. And I like the idea of having a safe sidewalk for everyone to use. I have watched people walking up and down Edwards on occasions, and I realize they're walking more because there's no Van Wyck, but walking up and down that road. And it isn't, especially on a weekend like this, it's not very safe. So I think we've got a lot of work we need to do on Edwards, and I think this would help us put in the right markings. And the last thing are the fences. We've talked about fences for years, and these were supposed to be small fences that were just to let people know that that was the limit. You're not supposed to walk out on the bluff. So they're just small fences, I think, are good. And I don't think that putting in Vista Points would take away from getting the Van Wyck Trail. I really think we want to pursue the Van Wyck Trail. And I think the Vista Points are nice to have. People can use the Vista Points and still use the trail. So I don't think that's going to take away from the trail at all. I think we still need to make a concentrated effort to work on the trail. And I really think it's going to come down to working with the Yurok and the Churai to see if there's a method we can use to keep the trail that'll make everybody happy. I think it's more important that that what the Yurok and the Churai say in terms of how they feel about the trail is what we're really looking for. And I think if they agree that we can find a way to work together to keep that trail in place, I believe we'll keep it without a problem. So I think it's, especially now that I hear Steve has some ideas that might be a little better than what some of the other things I've heard. So I think it's a really nice project, and I don't think we're using money just because it's there. I think originally we were very concerned about that, but I think this looks like a nice way to improve the streets in the city. So that's my idea. Thank you.
Thank you, Jack. David? Yes.
I hear this a lot too, and I live there, and it's at the point, and I know the people who live there are used to that trail and feel safe about it and stuff like that, but people are constantly almost falling. I had guys with mountain bikes almost falling, then walking up into my yard with them and stuff like that. So I think directing them to change the scope and getting going and having special design meetings. I'm sorry I missed the workshop earlier, but I think having them and having everybody aboard, the reason I voted last time to get rid of it, because I wanted to reset things, because I felt like I was getting wrapped up in a lot of decisions made before I got here. So I think we're still at a good starting point now, that if everybody's along with the grants, they know what's going on, they're told about it, and they get their input, and decisions are made together, that we do have a lot of potential right in that area. So that's it from me for now.
All right, thank you. Richard, do you have any comments you'd like to add? Questions?
I do. When I look at this bicycle and pedestrian connectivity project, I look at it as being something separate from the Van Wyck Trail. Whether you strip out even the utility repair and put that aside, this project still will help people that want to get from Trinity and Edwards down to the beach. It would be helpful to have a bike trail a pedestrian walkway. So I'm supportive of the project. It may be helpful to eliminate the sticking points, which is the Van Wyck Trail, to simply carve that out from this project so we can get this thing moving and provide an alternative method for people to get from Trinity and down Edwards to the beach and get them there safely without getting run over or other issues. But from my perspective, the sticking point is not the overall project, it's the Van Wyck Trail. So if that portion of it can be subtracted out, I don't think there'd be that much opposition to simply making it easier for pedestrians to use the current right-of-way to get down to the beach if that's where they want to go. Thank you.
So as we've said now multiple times, this connectivity project has pulled out the thing that everyone keeps talking about. So I'm not really interested in continuing to have to say over and over, we're not talking about the Van Wyck Trail, and we're also not excluding the Van Wyck Trail. So I think we've made it clear as a city that we are committed to finding a solution to that. And tonight is for the connectivity project. And our engineer gave us a summary of the different elements of the connectivity project: the Vista Points, the sidewalk, the crosswalk, the flow of traffic, the directing traffic, foot and bike traffic in a safe way that is within specs of, traffic considerations for width of street. So I'm going to ask that the council consider that when it's time for a motion. I want to bring it back one more time to the general public for comments or questions, and then I'm going to ask the council to either, to make a motion on this agenda item. So out to the public, the general public. Are there any closing comments that folks want to make from the general public on this item?
Steve, this Dick Bruce again. Steve, can you hear me?
Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Mr. Bruce.
I'd like to kind of address what Richard Kloppus just said. It seems to me the Van Wyck Trail has been pulled out of this connectivity project already. All you're talking about is the utility bypass down there and a couple of Vista Points. And as I mentioned in my written comments that I read in, I would take those two Vista Points out of there because to me, that's the first step in closing the Van Wyck Trail permanently.
So please, Richard, we have already heard this, and I just finished saying that we have pulled the Van Wyck Trail, the slumping part, out of this connectivity project. So I don't want to spend any more time talking about the Van Wyck Trail. We will make time and have made time with our work group this afternoon to discuss options. Please talk about, I need to hear from folks about the what is in the packet and what is an approved agenda item, which is to discuss the connectivity project in all of its elements. So the council has the ability to make a motion that says we approve the connectivity project and then list out if the council says with or without certain components of the connectivity project, then that's what we're here to do. So please stop making comments, everyone, about the Van Wyck Trail. It is not on the agenda item. There is no decision about the Van Wyck Trail tonight. And there's also no evidence that we are taking steps to slowly erode the possibility of ever having a Van Wyck Trail. So there's no evidence to support that. There's a feeling that people are trying to do that. There's no evidence to support that. So please focus on what's in the agenda packet with your comments.
If I may, Richard he's talking about things that are on the map. I also talked about things that are on the map, and he should not be chastised for bringing up things that are on the map and for the reasons he thinks they are on there. Our job is to listen and say, thank you very much. So I'm sorry that I needed to feel it come out and say this, but Mr. Mayor, I think your remarks were very disrespectful to the member of the public that was speaking.
And I apologize if it came across that way. And we've already heard from the engineer that removing the current infrastructure that's holding up the old Van Wyck Trail is a disturbance to the soil and is not a required part of the trail. All we're talking about is moving forward with a scope change. The design is coming next. So Richard, I apologize if I was disrespectful, but I do not want to hear about the Van Wyck Trail. It's not on the agenda item. Go
Mr.
ahead.
Mayor.
Yes.
Mr. Mayor, I
Yes, Mr.
suggest that you take the Vista Points out of the project. The Vista Points are already there. Anybody that wants to stop and look at the vista from there is free to do so at this point in time. So I don't think there's any reason to have them in there. Thank you.
Okay. Other comments regarding this project?
Hi, this is Sarah Lindgren Akana from the Cherry Ancestral Society. So I think, when we see this project come up on the agenda, part of the problem is that the history has never followed it. I think Ms. Stofsky said earlier about how there's, no prior comments being included, there's no prior letters being included, and I think that adds to the confusion about what has happened previously. The Cherry Ancestral Society has been on the record multiple times over the years since this project first came about in 2002 as opposing it. In 2002, we came up with an agreement with the city, but that's never included in the background or the history for this project in the last few years. That method to get down to the beach from Edwards Street, it was already, an alternative route was already agreed upon and carried out. So the alternative route was to go down Edwards to Galindo on Van Wyck and then back to Edwards. So you didn't have to go around that crazy corner on Edwards Street. And that's where you go down the boardwalk. So we already have that in place. And then, that agreement has somehow been kind of scrapped. And then, it's I guess the long-term memory doesn't exist for the city. And then we have, discussions about how do we get people safely down Edwards Street. Well, that alternative already exists, but now, it's being talked about as the connectivity project. And when Dan Berman first brought forward the connectivity project plans, the Cherry Ancestral Society went on the record as opposing the project completely, that it seemed like an overzealous project for such a small town in such a small area. And, at that time, the project was a little bit different, but it still included things like the split rail fencing. So the split rail fencing was supposed to be over on a different portion of trail, and he included it on Edwards Street as well. Although we, in the management team meetings, opposed that. He kept it in the design. We went on the record and opposed the project in its totality, but then we also opposed the split rail fencing. I think back then, this was probably 5 years ago or so. And at that time, the crosswalk, I think, had like lights or something, but it was a very high visibility crosswalk. And, we were asking to have those things toned down. There's suggestions of interpretive signage. There's, all this stuff that creates like visual clutter in an area where people come to look at nature. They come to look at, they come to look at the ocean. We talk about that when we talk about keeping trails open along the bluff because people want to see nature. They don't come to see signage. But, with the new buildings that are going to be going in, and then, the suggestion of interpretive signage, and then all this change that's about to happen, you're going to have a lot less natural beauty of Trinidad to look at. And that in turn is going to impact our cultural resources, because our cultural resources aren't just what's in the ground. It is the whole area. It's hard to go down and be able to continue to practice 1,000-year-old religions when you're staring at an interpretive sign that also is impacted by, new big buildings and things like that. So, in keeping with the design of the city as it is, it seems this project is just way over budget. There is a path to get down to the beach safely. If it needs to be better marked, if it, needs to be clarified for the public somehow, but that alternative route already exists. And it was a previous agreement with the Tri-Ancestral Society. And when we leave out the documents of, all the years that we've written letters, all the notes from all the meetings that we had from Dan Berman, the notes from the Tri-management team meetings where this was discussed, then we come to these meetings and it seems like we're talking from a clean slate. And, it's a little exhausting from our end when, we hear, and I appreciate, the sentiment when we hear, council ask, what does the Tri have to say, but it makes me really feel like staff isn't doing their job in informing the council what we have been saying for many, many years. So I think, that part of it has been lacking for a very long time. I'm not sure that I ever saw Dan accurately report out anything that was said at the management team meetings as far as us objecting to things like part of these designs and the projects. So that part is frustrating, but overall in the project's totality, the Tri-Ancestral Society has never been in support of the project.
If I may, Sarah, ask if there are any components of this connectivity project presented this evening that are worth moving forward with.
That I wouldn't be able to make the decision on my own. That's something that the board would have to decide.
Understood. Understood. Okay, thank you for those for those series of comments. Other folks wishing to make comments? Go ahead, Neil. Looks like, yes.
Yeah, I just wanted to say I'm in favor of the sidewalk because my sister has a amputated leg and it's really hard for her to, get around. And the sidewalk, I think, helps for people who are a little less able to move around. And also, I think it separates you from the traffic. I mean, it's not that crazy a street, but some people don't drive as slow as they should. And just being up on a sidewalk gives you a little more sense of safety, I would think. And plus, it would connect right up to the existing sidewalk on Galindo, and it just makes sense to me. That's my comment.
Thank you, Neil. Other folks from the community? All right, I'm going to bring it back to the council at this point. We have an agenda item, discussion decision regarding trail connectivity project revised design concept. Our goal tonight then is to make a decision on what to do with this project, how to move it forward, if to move it forward at all. So I'm hearing from the community that there are elements of the connectivity project. I'm just going to say that I've heard support for the temporary, or sorry, for the utilities to make sure that the utilities aren't in a way that, sorry, the stormwater rather is not going to further damage the slope. And I've also heard other folks on lots of different wavelengths about this component versus that component. So we've heard from the community. We know that there are elements that are able to be separated out. So I'm asking the council to consider a motion on this agenda item. Go ahead, Mr. Grover.
I'd like to make a motion. We authorize staff to request a formal scope change from Caltrans and proceed with design and right-of-way task in order that everybody gets to know what the design's going to be, by the end of this. We'll just get to that phase where we can start coming up with different people's ideas of what's going to happen.
Okay, we have a motion to move forward to direct staff to go ahead with the design change. Do we have a second?
I'll second it.
Okay. Any discussion, further discussion on the motions?
I'd like
Could you
to.
please repeat your motion, David, because you talked about
Good
something
idea.
else after.
Just keep it with the authorize the staff to request a formal scope change from Caltrans and proceed with design and right-of-way tasks. That's me.
Does
Was
that answer
more
your
clear?
question,
Was
Tom?
that better?
Yeah, we talked about a few things as far as not removing a retaining wall and some other things. I don't know if that should be part of
Yeah,
this or
that's
not. It's on the, it's this, so what I guess part of the confusion with myself and maybe others is that I'm looking at the map as being the scope change. Because that's all the information
right.
we have.
But
David, would you entertain I think it's
well,
called a
scope
friendly amendment to
and amendment.
add language regarding the removal of the current existing retaining wall?
I'm not
Yeah,
necessarily asking you to do that. David, I'm not necessarily asking you to do that. I just wanted you to repeat what you said and my understanding.
Yeah, I'm just going with the fourth recommendation verbatim. The fourth recommendation verbatim on staff recommendations because we're not approving any, we're not approving anything yet. So we're just authorizing them to request a formal scope change is the gist of it.
So we have a first and we have a second on recommendation number 4 to proceed with scope change, direct staff to proceed with scope change. At this point, just to make sure that we don't have any confusion, Gabe, if I could have you call roll for the vote for this.
Yes, sir, Mr. Mayor. We'll start with Councilmember Davies,
No.
Councilmember Wyck,
Yes.
Grover,
Yes.
Clompus,
Yes.
Ladwig.
Yes.
I heard 4 yeses and 1 no. Councilmember Davies voting no.
Okay, thanks for that vote. And just to reiterate, folks, that what we're talking about still leaves a lot of room for discussion on design and doesn't necessitate that we do everything as indicated, but we have to provide guidance for the grant to change the scope. Jack, did I see your hand go up?
Yeah, I just want to kind of add to what we're doing is to make sure we do get any kind of background paperwork that we say we haven't received. I think that should be a high priority on this to make sure we get that paperwork in and out to the public so they can see what's happened in the past concerning the whole Kennewick Trail and Galindo Trail issues.
Sounds good. I need to reach out to Carol. Our next agenda item is, let's see, discussion decision regarding encroachment permit for the Trinidad Coastal Land Trust, CCNM Dispersed Coastal Festival. And I'm going to ask Carol Vandermeer, who's the director of the Land Trust, Trinidad Land Trust, to introduce this topic as she has a statement to read. Carol, did I catch you in time? Are you on? She may have stepped away for a minute. There we go.
All right. Am I there?
Yeah, you're up, Carol.
All right. Thank you, everybody. I just got to listening in and working on some things. I had a letter to read, a statement from the festival committee. So can I just read that briefly?
Yes, please do.
Okay. On behalf of the Dispersed Trinidad Coastal Festival Planning Committee, we are requesting that our encroachment permit application be withdrawn. While the planned dispersed event received a Humboldt County COVID-19 approval certificate and would not have been a typical festival where people gather, we received numerous letters expressing concern about any planned activities in Trinidad. In response to these concerns, we are going to do an all virtual event. It is understandable that some community members would react negatively to the thought of a traditional festival during these times. We could have done a better job of communicating that we had no plans for a traditional festival. It was not a fundraiser, and it was strictly planned for educational purposes. Our committee is made up of multiple partners, all part of the California Coastal National Monument Gateway Group. Our goal is to educate the community about the importance of the California Coastal National Monument and demonstrate how multiple agencies and businesses can work together to provide safe and responsible enjoyment of the coast. Our virtual festival will start at 8:30 a.m. on the Saturday, the 26th, and we encourage all of you to tune in live via the Trinidad Coastal Land Trust Facebook page and learn more about the work of the California Coastal National Monument Gateway partners to educate and encourage responsible recreation. The virtual Trinidad Coastal Festival will also be recorded and can be viewed after the event at trinidadcoastallandtrust.org. So that's it.
Thank you, Carol, for your statement from the committee and for listening to folks from the community with concerns about having a gathering of people. So at this point, there really isn't any further discussion other than thank you for the statement, and we will move on. Moving on to number 3, discussion decision regarding resolution 2020-16 declaring drought conditions and implementing water conservation measures as defined by Trinidad Municipal Code Chapter 13.08 to prevent or mitigate an emergency. So at this point, I will turn it over to Eli for a preamble of the discussion.
Okay, for this item, we've been doing some water measurements in the creek. And as a result from those measurements, we wanted to have this item on the agenda to bring it forward to the community and make sure that they are aware that because of existing drought conditions in the overall area, that we would like to have some conservation efforts done by the community. So I will turn it over to Trevor, and I've also asked Steve to remain on the line where maybe he can weigh in on some of the water readings, but I'll turn it to Trevor. She can present this item.
Yeah, thank you, Eli. So as you know, the Planning Commission has been working on a drought contingency plan, and one of the kind of key components of it is setting these drought or water shortage stages. And, you know, as a water shortage or a drought gets progressively worse, you sort of step by step start doing more and more kinds of conservation, monitoring, education, public outreach is a big component of it. And so, you know, we don't have the plan in place, and we're not going to have it, you know, right away. It's still a work in progress, but you know, we do sort of have the framework put together, and stage 1 would be based on just basic drought conditions, something that would be declared early in the season based on, you know, a certain percentage shortage of rainfall, or possibly, you know, there's the various drought monitors. So USGS and other agencies sort of categorize droughts throughout the West. So it could be based on that. And so we're in a drought condition. And so at our last meeting, the Planning Commission did make a recommendation for the City Council to consider, you know, we don't have the plan in place, but at least, you know, making people aware that we are in drought conditions, starting some public outreach and requiring certain conservation measures. So I think, and so it's similar to what the city did in 2015 when the state was under drought conditions. It's based on that, and the city does have a fairly basic water shortage, water rationing ordinance that was adopted in 1977 during those drought conditions. Most of the restrictions here are really just on water waste. So there's no required, you don't have to cut back water use or anything like that. It's more, you're not watering or washing your car with a hose that doesn't have a shut-off nozzle. You're not watering so that water runs off into the street. So, pretty straightforward requirements. The city is monitoring Leffenholtz Creek pretty closely. There have been some observations that water levels are dropping. And so for example, the city has to notify Department of Fish and Wildlife if the flows get below a certain amount, 0.86 CFS. And it looks like, we may be getting close to that point. In talking to various people, Ryan, who runs the water plant, Steve Allen, who's familiar with the water plant, Tom from Pacific Watershed Associates, or Todd from Pacific Watershed Associates, who's monitoring the creek. It's not at a alarm stage at this point, but it is something to keep an eye on, because at some point, as the flows drop, the city's ability to pump water out of the creek could be impacted. So it's just we just want people to be aware. We want to start some public education and sort of implement this idea of stages that we've been talking about at the Planning Commission.
And we also have Steve Allen on the line. So Steve has been in touch as far as the monitoring of the creek. So if you could weigh in a little bit.
Sure. I think Trevor did a nice job of providing an overview. And it's been pointed out in some of our memos as well on the water system that it is a natural part of the local hydrology that in the summertime, the base flows are going to get fairly low. There is a permit requirement as part of the city's water right that if they get below, I believe, 0.86 CFS, as I recall, that they need to notify Fish and Wildlife to let them know. And then there's other triggers that the city must start reducing their withdrawal in order to allow a certain amount of bypass flow going down the creek. It was also Todd Kramer with Pacific Watershed Associates also didn't feel like there was a need for alarm, as Trevor mentioned, that this is a fairly typical thing, although maybe this is starting to happen a little bit earlier. But fortunately, Leffenholtz Creek does tend to have a pretty consistent base flow. So even though it's a little bit low earlier, it's not like it typically just dives off. However, it's something that happens potentially every year or could happen every year. And therefore, having a policy in place for what you need to do at certain different trigger points is important for the city to have in place.
Yeah, thank you, Steve. Just as a side note, I just wanted to mention to the public that I did receive notification about a half hour ago from our Public Works Department that the water has been restored to the lower part of the city in the Edwards-Van Wyck area. So I'm glad that has gotten back to normal. So we'll go back to this item. So thank you both, Steve and Trevor, of course, for your presentation. And I'll just turn it over to the mayor, and if you want to see if there's any questions from council and the public.
Yeah, let's start with questions or comments from the council. Anyone have anything regarding this resolution? Go ahead, Mr. Davies.
So thank you. I think this is a good thing that we're looking at and getting ready to put forth this resolution. I just had a couple questions of what would public outreach look like at this point, so we know, so the public can know how they're going to be notified of this type of situation.
That's a good question. And at the Planning Commission level, in terms of our plan, that's something we're still working on. I think that we sort of figure that out. The resolution does set up a water committee of council members to work with staff to sort of implement these provisions. So, there has been a suggestion, for example, that Angela sort of be in charge of disseminating information. The city's RVS software that does the water billing has some capabilities, so we can send out like postcard notices to the water customers, for example. So that would be one avenue that would be good to use. Putting information on the city's website, the email newsletter. One of the things we've talked about in the drought plan is also including people in the Leffenholz Creek watershed. So not just city water customers, but those who are also using Leffenholz Creek, and let them know that the creek is getting low, and ask them to conserve water for everybody who's using that creek. So there's a variety of methods, and I think that's still open for discussion, but we do have a couple of ideas that we'd like to start with.
Thank you.
Other questions, comments from the council? Okay, any questions, comments from the folks who are left on the meeting, the community? All right, hearing none. Trevor did mention that the ordinance does call for 2 council members to join with city staff in a small committee to work on implementing the educational component of this. Do I have any interest from the council to join said committee? Richard?
Yeah, happy to.
Anyone? And Jack, looks like. Mr. Davies, Mr. Gover, your feelings hurt if Richard and Jack take this on?
No, I'm pretty good right now with what's going on. So
Sure, you guys are both very busy. So thank you for that, Jack and Richard, in terms of joining city staff. I'm remembering 5 years ago, perhaps, that we had a similar situation where we had recommendations. So I assume that we can sort of dust off old notifications. Now we do have the newsletter, so I would urge us to use our electronic means and our postering website sort of means as well to notify folks. So at this point, I believe we're at the point where we need a motion on the resolution. Go ahead, Tom.
Right. This is just a wording thing I noticed on number 5, second page of the resolution. It says, contrary finding is made by the board by resolution. So maybe we need to change that to council. I don't know if we're not really a board.
Oh, is that? That's not for the water committee board. Oh, never mind.
I agree with Tom. I think that should be council. So it's the council who enacts these conservation measures, and it's also the council who ends them.
And I'm assuming that once drought conditions are no longer an issue, once the water level is no longer at a level of concern, we don't have to do anything to unenact this resolution. Really, the parameters of this resolution are as long as the drought conditions exist, right? So come November, we don't have to come back and clean anything up and say we're no longer required to mitigate water loss drought conditions, right? I just want to make sure.
No, I think that is the purpose of number 5 there, and that's a pretty common kind of clause that I've seen in these ordinances and in plans, and that it would require council action to rescind the measures.
Okay.
I think it's a safe gap or stop gap measure. I don't know, you could think of different things like somebody reporting a neighbor because something is going on in December when we're having pouring down rain and a neighbor thinks you're, I don't know, wasting water or something. So it might prevent,
that helps.
This reporting or something like that.
That helps.
They wouldn't be pushing for a fine or something, maybe. I don't know.
Really, this resolution is about water conservation, period, but it also ties to the level of the creek and this. Okay, that helps. I was having a hard time connecting those two. So do we have any other discussion on this item? All right, do we have a motion regarding resolution 2020-16?
I move we adopt resolution 2020-16 with the amendment to the wording on number 5.
A second.
We have a first and a second. All those in favor, show me a hand.
Aye.
Aye. Passes unanimously. Thank you very much for that discussion. And thank you also for preparing this to get ahead of it. The being in front of this is a lot easier than having to have an emergency meeting. So it really means a lot to be in front of this, anticipating lower flows and being ready for it. So at this point, we will move on to item number 4, discussion decision regarding first reading of ordinance 2020-01, extending the 7.75% transaction and use tax for general purposes to continue to be administered by the California Department of Tax and Fee Administration if adopted by the voters at the November general election. So, Eli, would you have any opening words for this?
Yeah, basically, this is something that, needs to be done, and it's part of the process. And as a result, our city clerk, who's actually working with getting everything done for the election and making sure that we have everything in place, put this together. So I'll turn it over to Gabe, and he can address it.
Thank you, Eli. This is probably one of the least complicated agenda items on tonight's agenda, so I'm happy to take this one. The city has an ordinance in place that allows the current add-on sales tax to be in effect, and that ordinance has set a expiration date. And that was set almost 4 years ago when the current existing sales tax measure went into effect. And in order to, I guess it's, get the Board of Equalization or California franchise tax, is it the franchise tax board? I'm not looking at my packet, sorry. Department of Tax to not initiate the process of taking apart this tax, which takes a couple of months. The city has to be proactive and sort of put them on notice that we are about to have an election, and please don't discontinue our tax until we say so. And in the meantime, we are going to pass an ordinance that will tell you that we plan to extend it unless further notice occurs. And that's what this ordinance is all about. It just changes the tax deadline for expiration. It pushes it out 4 years, but it's only hinged upon approval in November. And if it doesn't get approved, then this ordinance is essentially null and void. So that's where we're at today. We have to have 2 readings of this ordinance. Tonight would be the first, and then the next meeting, whether it be at the end of September or early October, will be the second reading and put this to rest.
Thank you very much for that. Any questions from the council or comments? From the public, questions or comments from the public? Any need to read the ordinance or, we've got it in the city packet, so nothing has changed from what's in the packet. All right, hearing none, do we have a motion to move forward with resolution 2020-01?
I move to accept ordinance 2020-2021.
That's second.
First from Jack, second from David. All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
All right, thank you very much. Passes unanimously. And the final discussion item is discussion decision is council member committees and assignments. So let me get back to my packet. Newly appointed Councilman Klompus has expressed interest in expanding his role by taking on, I know, I'm reading it here, taking on Dwight's, assuming Mr. Councilman Miller's duties by default. Is everyone able to look at the current assignments of duties of committees and groups?
I do have some questions.
Go ahead.
The Indian Gaming Benefit Committee, I couldn't find any information concerning that. I don't know when they've met, or who to meet with. Maybe I could discuss with Eli at another day exactly how to get in contact with some of these folks so that I can begin to contribute and be able to support the city. But the Indian Gaming Benefit Committee, I'm not sure if they've met in a while or even.
I think Jack has something to say on that one.
Yeah, that's true.
I think you better talk to Dwight, but if I remember right, Dwight was not meeting there. That seemed to be one that was not meeting almost at all or rarely. So I think Dwight would be the one that could tell you about that.
Okay.
Yeah.
And when I joined the council, Richard, 4 years ago, I met with Gabe to kind of get the background on some of these as well. So this is a good opportunity. David, did you have something?
I was just going to say that I'd like to keep my position on the board of directors at RCA, which was one of Mr. Miller's assignments, but I have special considerations for that. Some special training and stuff that I did specifically to be on that. So, I mean, I'm willing to take that or give another assignment if he still needs to do. But I think I only had a couple that I was the first one.
That's okay with me.
Office of Emergency Services. I've never done anything. So.
All right. Any other wishes to move around and take any other spots with some of these different committee assignments?
Okay. Can you explain what the Office of Emergency Services is? The OES?
I think Eli meets with those folks.
Yeah. Well, I can tell you. Yeah, that's a state level agency that deals with any type of emergency, meaning like actually drought would also fall in that category. But, something that is traumatic. So certainly if there's an earthquake, this is almost like the FEMA on the state level.
Okay. Gotcha.
So what I'm hearing you say, Richard, is basically you're interested in taking on all the assignments where Miller was assigned on that's in the council packet. Is that minus the RCEA that David is?
That would be fine.
Okay.
That would be fine.
And actually on RCEA, it was Miller as the representative and Grover as the alternate. So if Grover becomes the representative, then Richard could be the alternate.
Yeah, that would make sense. I do need an alternate. There is no alternate now.
That's fine.
Yeah, that'd be great.
All right, so we can make those changes, and thank you very much for your interest in joining up with some of these committees. At this point, that concludes the regular discussion decision items from the agenda. And we have future agenda items at this point, and we already discussed one, which was bringing the stormwater project back. I think we need to just fill in some of the details on the stormwater project regarding the plan A, or choice A, choice B, I believe is what we are really coming down to in terms of location of the infiltration chamber. Is that am I remembering that correctly, Eli?
Well, this was really just put in there to sort of update everyone as to how everything's progressing with the joint projects, meaning the project that the city is planning along with the project that the Rancheria is planning. So somehow we have to get on the same page with that. And when we bring it back to you, it's probably, when we have a better idea from the Rancheria as to if we're able to access and do concept A, which would involve having it partially on the Rancheria property. Otherwise, we would proceed with concept B, which would be to have it entirely on the city right of way.
That's right. And we are still working out the details of those meetings with the Rancheria.
Yes, yes. So it'll be on a future agenda. It just won't be like immediate. But as soon as we have something to bring back, we will.
Okay.
Okay. Other agenda items that we need to fast track to the October meeting.
Well, the one item that we have here that I wanted to mention, and I mean, we can put it as a placeholder if people can meet on the 22nd, which would be 2 weeks from today. Otherwise, I can always ask them if they can do it in October if we have nothing else. But it's a request from RCEA regarding our solar project. Basically, they said that happy to report that the city received 2 responsive proposals, and they were asking that we would set up a meeting which would be for consideration of entering into energy service design - build contract for City Hall PV solar project. And in the notes here, I have recommended scheduling for this item would be September 22nd at a special meeting. That would be the preferred option. Otherwise, it's possible to keep it to the 11th if we didn't want to meet, or if there's nothing else that we're going to be addressing on the 22nd.
And I'm assuming that if we do have a second meeting in September, that would more likely to allow this project to be completed this year, or is that?
I think either way, it'll be completed this year. It's just that it helps with the timeline if we do it September 22nd rather than waiting until the October meeting. It would help move it along quicker.
I'm happy to have a one agenda item meeting if that's what it takes to keep this thing moving. How do other folks feel about that?
Yes, I am too, because I saw the presentation and yeah, that guy's on it. We'll get a lot done if we can get him over here. It's Jeff, like Jeff Kaufman or something.
Okay.
Well, Mike Foley of RCEA is the one I'm currently working with.
Okay.
But do the other 3 of you have the ability to meet a second time this month? Sounds like Jeff does.
I'm.
Yep.
Tom, you're okay.
Should be fine.
Okay. Richard, any issue with that?
No.
Okay. Okay. So maybe we can plan ahead to have a short meeting on the 22nd.
Okay. For the October meeting, a budget check. It's a quarterly, our quarterly budget check.
Mm-hmm.
That sounds, yeah, we agreed on that, right? Quarterly, you said?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Other agenda items then that folks want to see? Would we have the second reading of this resolution regarding the extension of the 0.75%? We'd have to.
Yeah, and possibly have that in the October meeting, because ideally you would have it 30 days apart, roughly, between first and second reading.
So the October meeting would have the second reading.
Right.
There would also be a first reading for the TOT ordinance on that date, September 22nd.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Yeah. So, so you're saying to do it in September rather than the October meeting?
Why not?
Okay. Well, it's up to the council if they want to have a second agenda item for that meeting or just go into October. Now, the TOT is actually an ordinance.
Correct.
So what I'm getting at is the 30-day thing, because if we do the 30-day, you could go from the October meeting to the November meeting. Otherwise, it doesn't help by having it September 22nd unless we have a second meeting in October, because you need to wait the 30 days.
That's fine. Let's do it the regular meeting.
Yeah. Okay, so the other item that I'm just going to mention, and then if someone has something else. So of course we were talking about the Yurok tribe would like to have a government-to-government meeting. So in my discussion with the representative today, and let me just get my notes here. So Georgiana Jensaw, so she did indicate that the whole tribal council of the Yuroks would like to meet. And I asked her, I said, we don't have our government-to-government meeting process set up, but if we have the whole council meet, then that could be an option. And she said that that would work for them. Then I told her that as far as how we would have the meeting and whether it would be in person or virtual. And she said that they would like to have a face-to-face meeting, but they've been having their meetings so far on GoToMeeting. And I told her that so far we've been having all of our meetings like that also, meaning by WebEx. So they indicated, she indicated that she thought that they could just meet with us virtually like we're meeting. And I mentioned to her, because we don't have the government-to-government thing in place yet, that if we have an open meeting, then it wouldn't be a problem. But if we didn't want to have an open meeting, then we have to go through that process to get all the protocol in place. And she said that she felt that that would be fine with them also, to have a meeting that's open to the public. And I told her that what we can do is make some suggestions as to possible dates today, and that I would get back to her tomorrow. So basically, for the rest of September, what are some Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursdays that, ideally Tuesday or Wednesday, but it could be a Thursday also, that would work for everybody.
Well, I'm free the same week of the 22nd, so that's a Tuesday. So I'm free the rest of that week.
Okay, so it could be let's say it could even be possibly that Monday, the 21st, 22nd. Of course, we'd have our meeting the 23rd, 24th, something like that. Of course, even the 22nd, if we had a meeting then, if it's a short one, we could possibly have their meeting also that evening.
21st, there's a Trails Committee meeting.
On the 22nd?
On the 21st.
Oh, the 21st, okay. So the 22nd may be a possibility, or 23rd or 24th. How's that work for everybody?
22nd for me would be tough. 23rd and on would be good.
Okay.
I concur.
Yeah, that whole week is open for me.
23rd would be fine.
23rd would be fine for Tom? Okay. And Dave, you said which days?
Yeah, that's fine for me. That works for them.
Any three of those?
Yep.
Okay. And then Richard?
I should be available.
Okay. And then Tom, other than the 23rd, any other days work?
The 24th would work for me as well.
Okay. And how about the 22nd? I know Jack said it's questionable. Is that a good day for you or not, Tom?
If our city council meeting was short, otherwise I'd prefer not to do it on the 22nd.
Oh, okay.
But
okay.
If we had one agenda item on the 22nd, it's approving we've already approved the plan for the photovoltaic array, so I would be fine with something short after that.
Okay.
What time are you talking about, Eli?
I don't know. We can suggest times to them, possibly even in the afternoon if you guys would like, rather than having to wait until the evening. Otherwise, we can say the evening.
What's that?
I have a job that I have to be at.
What I gotta do.
Okay, so basically talking about like 6 o'clock? Okay.
I could do the city council meeting, at 5 or whatever, if it's the 22nd, and then the other one at 6. That would,
okay.
That would
Okay.
work.
Okay.
Really low for me.
So 6 o'clock. And then Jack, are you available, you think, possibly on the 22nd or not?
Oh, if you're gonna do it that late, that's not a problem.
Okay. Okay. Okay, so I'll suggest to them the 22nd, 23rd, or 24th at 6 o'clock.
Okay.
Okay.
So we'll keep this discussion open on other agenda items as they come up. I think we've got something to work with. I would like us to move into the closed session.
Okay.
So I'm gonna close the regularly scheduled meeting, and then we're gonna move into closed session. So thank you very much for those who attended.
Yeah, and I'll start the meeting in a little bit. In a couple minutes, I'll start one.
Okay.
We have to start a new meeting.
Thank you.
Right.
Eli, are you sending out a new
email?
Well, hold on, and let me see if Gabe is still there. Gabe, what do you suggest we do?
Just give me about, and then I'll send you all the 6 of you an invitation to join.
Why don't we just ask Richard and Steve and Access Humboldt to leave?
Well, I think it would be cleaner if we don't have it on this, because maybe someone else could come back on.
Yeah, no,
Okay.
this meeting and I'll start a new one.
Okay.
Okay, great. Thanks, everybody.
Email for
Okay, bye.
All right, see you in a second.